Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of This Week in Bikes. I'm your host, Eli Ferguson. I've been racing bikes for about 10 years and watching bike races for even longer. Title is pretty self-explanatory. Basically, every week I'm going to talk to you about what bike races happened, what bike races are happening, what's going on in the bike industry, so on and so forth, just what happened this week in bikes. So, basically, this weekend we're going to talk about the road season wrapping up, what happened last weekend in road racing, what's going to happen in the last week of the road racing season. We're going to talk about my thoughts on the end of the Mountain Bike World Cup season. We're going to talk about the start of the cyclocross season, what happened in the first pro race, and what's going to happen in this week's races. Then our main story is going to be the end and final race of the Lifetime Grand Prix this season. The overall is really tight, so we're going to spend a lot of time on that. That's our main story tonight. So we're not going to go super in depth on road racing this week, just so we have more time for our main story, which is Lifetime Grand Prix. On the men's side, our two main races this happened this week were Lombardia, or the Race of the Falling Leaves in Italy, and Paris Tour. Lombardia, if you've watched any road racing recently, Tadej Pogacar is just better. There's not really a whole lot to say on that. He can just sort of decide when he wants to win, and it's exactly what he did. On Saturday, Quinn Simmons, the American rider, went from the gun breakaway, was solo for a really long time, barely missed the podium, came through in fourth. He's had a really good season, and I think it sort of culminated in that ride. It was a super good ride for him, so congratulations to Quinn Simmons. Other notable thing, we had Michael Storer, the Australian rider for Tudor Pro Cycling, on the third step of the podium at Lombardia. He also had a really good race, stuck with Remco Evenepoel for a surprisingly long time, in my opinion. He had one GC win and 3 stage wins this year on top of his podium at Lombardia, so I wonder if this is a breakout season for him, if we are going to see a whole lot more out of him next season. Paris Tour, won by Matteo Trentin. This race used to be a really boring sort of sprinters classic to end the season. They decided to stick in some gravel sectors a few years ago. It is now one of the most interesting races on the calendar, in my opinion. If you did not watch it, I highly recommend it. If you just want to watch highlights, the YouTube channel Lantern Rouge had a great breakdown, and I think he and I sort of had the same takeaways from the race, which is tactically, Decathlon 82R sort of fumbled a little. They had a dude in a two-man break that probably would have won that sprint, and they decided to bluff a little and have him sit up and try and play the numbers game. They just waited a little too long to do it, so they obviously did much better than I would have, but I'm sure there was a lot of discussion about that one on the team bus afterwards. We also saw the final round of the Coupe de France. If you're not familiar, it's a 17-race series that starts in February and ends in October. Has an overall for all the races combined, which was won by Clement Venturini for Arkea. That's a very big deal for his team. Arkea is currently on the bubble of getting relegated out of the World Tour right now, so they need all the UCI points they can get. I think he kind of won the overall on accident. Anyone who wins the Coupe de France overall sort of wins on accident. It's just who happens to get sent to the most races and finish really consistently well. And he finished really consistently well, finishing fourth last weekend. The final 10K were carnage of that race. The break got caught a little too early. All the sprints were really disorganized, a lot of corners, no leadouts. So highly recommend watching that race. For the remainder of the season, for the women and men, there's 7 races left. One of them's happening as I'm recording this, the prologue for the Tour of Holland, so I'm sure we'll be talking about that in the next episode. We also have the Tour of Guangxi, which is the biggest Chinese race of this season, so that's fun. Basically, these last few races of the season after Paris Tour and Lombardia are always kind of sad because a lot of the hitters avoid them. So what we'll probably see is the bigger teams who've had really good seasons are going to send younger riders in an attempt to get their younger riders more experience and just race days on the bike, because that's always good for younger riders. While we're going to see the smaller teams like Arkea, like Intermarché, like Cofidis that are either on the bubble for getting promoted into the World Tour or relegated out of the World Tour, they're going to be sending everyone they can to get all the UCI points they can. So that will probably create some really interesting race dynamics in those races, where you'll be seeing some teams race more for points and getting as many dudes in the top 10 as opposed for the win. Might be interesting, might not. We'll see. Last week in the women's side of road racing, the Italian champ Elisa Borghini won the very hilly Tre Valley race ahead of Demi Vollering. I did not have time to watch any of the women's races yet, but I saw the finish line photo from Tre Valley. It looked like a very close sprint. Elisa Longoborghini also won another Italian one-day race that I couldn't figure out how to pronounce the name of. She had a very good season. She won 7 one-day races and 2 general classifications, including the Giro d'Italia, which for an Italian rider, massive deal. For any rider, massive deal. So congratulations to her for wrapping up a absolutely massive season. Lorena Wiebes won the Beniche. I'm sure I'm butchering that. The SD Works rider added another win to a very long list of wins this season. She also won the UCI Gravel World Championship, which I'm not talking about today, but we might later. That was so Bernice James was her 26th win of the season, which is a big number for anyone, so that's really impressive. The last women's road race of the week was the Vuelta Ciclista Andalucia, with a course that featured 3 big climbs. The racer was won by the young British rider Kat Ferguson. It's her 3rd win of the season. Kat Ferguson, I had not heard of her on the road side until this season, but I had definitely heard of her on the cross side. She's a big cyclocross rider, which brings us perfectly into our next story, which is the start of the cyclocross season. Those of you who are newer to bikes and don't know what cyclocross is, it's a race that's typically around an hour around a tight grass, mud, sand, pavement, anything circuit. Bikes that look like road bikes, relatively skinny tires. Sometimes you have to get off and run. If there's obstacles, there's barriers, there's planks. There's a whole culture around it. It's super predominant in Belgium and the Netherlands. If you want a better explanation of that, 124 Cycling has a great video explaining what cyclocross is. But a few weekends ago, we saw the start of the sort of big, major, whatever you want to say, cyclocross races of the season, with the first Exact Cross race of the season. Exact Cross being one of the 4 main cyclocross series that is televised, at least. I'll probably do a bigger dive into what all the series are as we get later into the cyclocross season, and there's less to talk about since there won't be any road or anything. But the first round was in Melbeke. I don't speak Flemish yet, sorry. But we saw Jordan Wissieu on the men's side take a win after a very long day of pack racing. These early season races where it is dry, the straights are usually very long. You see a whole lot of people being in a peloton. There's a lot of drafting. There's a lot of team tactics. He rides for the Crelan Cordon team. If you watch the race, it's a white and green jersey with red accents. They were the only squad to send a full, really big team, and they used that to their advantage, as they often do in these early season races. Just by having more riders, you can run more team tactics, and it worked out for them. On the women's side, we saw another Crelan rider, Inge van de Heide, take a win. Maybe the most dominant performance I've ever seen at a cross race in a really long time, to be honest. She did not have a whole lot of teammates. Her teammate Manenbacher is still in the US racing, and then her other team, Sana Kant, the Belgian champion, just didn't really feature a whole lot in the race, which happens. Inge van Heide, the winner, super good in the sand. She attacked really early, was brought back. Typically, after attacking early, if you get brought back, you sit in, maybe you wait, maybe you get dropped. She just immediately attacked again, which I think speaks to the fact that she is A, younger rider, and B, super fit right now, which is really cool. The race did end up coming down to a sprint in which she won. Yeah, so I think looking forward, both races were won by Crelan riders. They're really good in these early season ones where it's dry, just because they have the biggest team typically. Unless the Powell-Sawson team and the Trek Baloise Alliance send a squad, which they did not last weekend. Not sure what was up with that. There was no Trek rider, there was no Powell's riders on the women's side. It's very odd. Maybe they're just waiting, saving themselves for later in the season. Cyclocross season is really long. We're gonna have big races all the way up until February, so maybe they're saving themselves for later. But until they start sending full squads, I think we're gonna see a lot of Crelan dominance in these early season races, especially the flatter, faster ones, just because they can run more team tactics, just because they have more of a team. This weekend, we're going to see the next 2 races. We're going to see the Exact Cross in Essen and the Super Prestige in Rudevord. This will be the second Exact Cross of the season. Essen, on the dude's side, we saw last year Niels van de Putter barely got second. Like, he unclipped in the final corner, almost Sherlock for a win. He looked really good at the first Exact Cross of the season, despite the fact that he had a mechanical. So I don't know, maybe he'll do really well at Essen. And then the Super Prestige in Rudevord, won by Jordan Wissieu last year, who, if you remember, won the first cross race of the season. Very similar course, very long, fast. I think he's got a really good chance at doing very well there again. Obviously, there's the obvious favorites that are just always favorites, like Lauren Swake and Michael Van Toornout. I think the big thing to watch for at Rudevord will be, is the sand rideable? I think if it is, that will factor into Lauren Swake's hands, because he is notoriously one of the best sand riders in all of cyclocross. On the women's side for those two races, I think the obvious pick for both of them is Inge van de Heider. I don't know a whole lot about the courses and if they suit her or not. She just looked so phenomenally fit at the first exact cross of the season, and I'm not sure if anyone else has anything to match her unless Trek and Powell show up in more force at the next two races. Yep. So my pick for dude's race in Rudevord is definitely Jordan Lucia. Like, I think we'll see him go 2 in a row there. I haven't checked the forecast, but if it's dry, I think that should be a pretty easy win for him if the team works as well together as they did the first exact cross of the season. For all my people in the US, both those races will be streaming on HBO Max. If you're into some slightly more morally gray ways of watching the race, those are always on YouTube within a few hours if you just search for them, just usually without commentary, which is whatever. Now on to our main story for the day, which is the end of the Lifetime Grand Prix, or the finale of the Lifetime Grand Prix for this season. For those of you that are not familiar with the Lifetime Grand Prix, it's the series of probably the six biggest off-road races in the U.S. Runs from April until this Saturday. A whole lot of money on the line. All the best American off-road riders, gravel mountain bike, same from a lot of riders from Europe this year, doing very well. The series so far started at Seattle Gravel, which was the first, or the Seattle Classic, which was the first time the Grand Prix race there was a gravel race. I was actually at that one. I had a very bad performance, but we don't talk about that. That's neither here nor there. And that saw Sofia Vichafanye get second overall in the women's and take maximum points, as the person that won, Kate Courtney, was not a Grand Prix rider. Keegan Swenson on the men's side won and took maximum points. They then went to the 200-mile unbound gravel, arguably the most prestigious gravel race in the world, probably trumping even UCI Gravel Worlds. Cecily Decker finished second overall and got maximum points. And Cam Jones, who was a wild card for the Grand Prix, meaning he was still trying to race his way into the overall, took max points in a very long break with a French rider named Simon Pelot. Wild card this year, that's a new thing, basically meant they had a pool of wildcard riders, and the top 2 wildcard riders on both the men and women's side after the first 2 races got bumped up into the overall. So Jones and Pelot were both wildcards. That performance in Unbound boosted them both up into the proper overall rankings. Then saw the Leadville 100 mountain bike, which saw Keegan Swenson win yet again. At altitude, there's not really anyone that comes over that race yet that can match him at all. It was a dominant performance. It was the Keegan show. He was just out front by himself for a really long time. It was very impressive to watch. Melissa Rollins got second. If you don't know who Melissa Rollins is, she won last year. She took max points this year. Got beat by Kate Courtney, who's more typically an XCO, shorter distance mountain bike racer. But Melissa Rollins has done Leadville an ungodly amount of times. If you look into it, it's hilarious. I think she's done it at least 5 times, which is a whole lot of times to race Leadville. She won last year as well, so good on her. Little Sugar, this was the first time this race has been in the Grand Prix in Bentonville. This race is in Bentonville, Arkansas. Only proper mountain bike race of the series. I skipped over the Schwamigan Classic in Michigan, which was won by Alexi Vermeulen and Melissa Rollins. That's the shortest race in the Grand Prix, 40 miles of rolling grass hill. It's one of those that they call a mountain bike race. Same with Leadville. It's very iffy on if it's actually a mountain bike race or not, but it's neither here nor there. Then we saw Little Sugar, which was won by Cam Jones and Sophia. That's the first time this race has been a Grand Prix. Also the first time that there's been like a proper technical mountain bike race in the Grand Prix. A lot of people had Keegan as an easy win for this, which I think I did too, to be honest. He is the current marathon mountain bike world champion. He flatted, had some mechanical difficulties. Cam Jones, who I'm going to be honest, I knew nothing about him coming into the season before he won Unbound. He had a really good ride at Little Sugar. He seems to be very into the early break, which has worked or not, or really not worked. It's either won him the race or he's finished mid-pack. And then Sofia Vichafanier taking the win on the women's side. This is the first time she's won the overall this season, but she has not yet finished off the podium of Lifetime racers yet this season, which explains why she's leading the championship right now. We're coming into the last round, Big Sugar. This one has been in the Grand Prix every year. They've done the Grand Prix. Bentonville, Arkansas, I think it's 100, 110 miles, somewhere in there. Really chunky gravel, very hilly. This is one of the most aggressive / dangerous starts in all of gravel. Like, if you find anyone's onboard footage, you can see maybe 3 bikes ahead of them. Everyone's 8 wide. It's really sketchy. This race is known for flats. That's all this race's deciding factor is if you flat or not. I think tire choice is going to be essential. I think I'll be very surprised if we see anyone in the top 10 that's not on mountain bike tires. I think Alexei Vermeulen won on gravel tires last year, but I don't know. I think he has the fitness, but I think in terms of not flatting, that may have just been a fluke. I think we will see lots of flats. There will be carnage. Lots of the riders competing for the overall will probably flat. That's why they have drop races. Only the 5 to 6 best race counts for the overall. But lots of flats. I think if I had to be there this weekend, there would not be any discussion. I'd be on the widest mountain bike tires I could fit on my bike. No second thoughts. For the overall, because that's the main interesting part coming in the last race of the season, women's side, Sofia Vichfania has already clinched the overall based upon my very questionable math. I want to say that before I get into all of this. I am not a math person in any way, shape, or form. I did like 5 days worth of math in an Excel spreadsheet. I might be wrong, so if you're watching this and you're racing on Saturday, do not base your strategy based upon what I'm about to say for overall points. That would be an awful idea. Yeah, but I think small chance I might have been right. If my math is right, we're just gonna assume it is for the sake of this. Sofia Vichfania has clinched the championship, and the other 2 riders on the podium are at the moment are Cecily Decker and Melissa Rollins. Yeah, no matter what happens on Saturday, Sofia walks away with her 3rd overall win, 3 out of 4, not too bad. She's just been quietly very consistent this season. She hasn't had any big flashy wins, like she didn't win Unbound, she didn't win Leadville, so on and so forth. She only won the overall at Little Sugar, but she's just been very quietly, really consistent, has not finished off the Lifetime podium yet, which is really impressive because there's so many mishaps that can always happen in gravel and mountain bike racing, so just to be that consistent for a whole season is very impressive. Cecily Decker and Melissa Rollins are super close on points for second. I think the interesting thing will be Cecily Decker did not race Little Sugar. I'm not sure if she was injured, sick, or if I'm guessing she just intentionally missed it, which I think would be very smart. 2 weekends of back-to-back racing, especially longer races. Skipping the first one, knowing it doesn't play to your strength, she's going to be, if she races Saturday, which I'm 99% sure she is, she's going to be incredibly fresh. She's going to have the best legs, most likely. I think it'll play to her strengths as after seeing her performance at Unbound. Melissa Rollins raced Little Sugar, comes from more mountain bike background. I think the more technical nature of the Big Sugar course will play into her hands. I think it'll just be a question of if she's more cooked because she raced Little Sugar. I guess we'll see. It'll be a very interesting race to see who's second and who's third. The race for the extended podium on the women's side, also very close. Cecil Lejeune, I'm so sorry if I got that name wrong, I probably did, and Sarah Lang are 5th and 6th. They're only separated by 4 points. The difference between 5th and 6th in prize money is $1,500. There was a whole lot to race for those 2, even if it is just extended podium. There is a whole lot still to play for them. Then on the men's side, this is where it gets really interesting in terms of overall, in my opinion. I think everyone coming into the season had thought Keegan was going to win dominantly, which is fair because he's done it 3 times. If it's happened 3 times, why wouldn't it happen a 4th? That being said, Simon Pillow and Cam Jones are tied for second at the moment and are only 1 point off of Keegan in the overall. Yet again, very questionable math, but if my math is correct, I'm going to read it off my computer here. If they all finish 7th or higher, the order they finish will be the order of the championship. So let's say Keegan finishes 7th, Palou finishes 5th, Cam Jones finishes 4th. Jones wins the championship, Palou's 2nd, Keegan's 3rd. 7th is this weird magical number in the math, just because with all the drop race and everything, but if Palou finishes at least 9th and ahead of Keegan and Cam Jones, he wins the overall. Same goes for Cam Jones. If he finishes ahead of Keegan and Palou and he is 9th or better, he wins. If Keegan beats Palou or Jones, he wins. So if Keegan finishes 11th or worse, and either Palou or Jones are in the top 11, they will beat him in the overall. And yet again, very questionable math. If you're a racer, if you, on the off chance that Palou, Jones, or Keegan Swenson happen to see this, do your own math, guys. Like, I don't want to be the reason you miss the overall because you're like, oh my god, he's 4th, he's winning. Do your own math. I would not be, if I was Keegan, if I woke up on Saturday and suddenly I was Keegan Swenson, I had to win Big Sugar, I might run some team tactics. He's famously teammates with Tobin Ortenblad, cyclocross and mountain bike racer. Only in the trio of people in the hunt for Lifetime Grand Prix overall, he's the only person with a teammate. I would probably use Tobin just to police the front, make sure that Palou and Jones can't get off the front. Palou and Jones both big fans of those early breakaways. I would not be surprised if they tried that. I think it'll be very hard for them to get off the front because I don't think Keegan will let them. Being said, if I woke up and I was Keegan, I would have just watched Palou and Jones, and if a 10-11 person group starts going off the front, I'd just let them go. Keegan won't do that. He's a racer's racer. He's said multiple times over the last 4 seasons of Lifetime Grand Prix that he doesn't think of it as an overall. He thinks about it as 6 individual races. If he wakes up and he decides to just think about the overall on Saturday, I would not be surprised if he just lets a big group go, assuming that Palou and Jones are not in that group. Because if Palou and Jones are not 9th or higher, based upon my sketchy math, they win. So I would not be surprised if he just lets a big group go off the front. I don't think he will. That is what I would do. I think the other person to watch is going to be Alexei Vermeulen. He is in a very close race for 5th at the moment. He can move up or down in the rankings on Saturday. He won last year. He's a very good road racer. He had I think, a very surprising, even to him, result at Little Sugar. He does not come from a mountain bike background. Still put up a very solid race. He had not the Unbound and not the Leadville he was hoping for, but he's had a really good last bit of the season when he won Schwalmingen. I think he's in excellent form, and he won here last year, so maybe he wins again this year and moves up the overall a little bit more. About all I have on Lifetime Grand Prix. Yet again, I think big things are going to be tire choice, tactics. I'm not sure how hot it's going to be, but it has the potential to be very hot at this race. Not flatting. That's end all be all of this race is just getting in clean air so you can see rocks and not flat. That race is going to be streaming on YouTube, which they've done for almost all the Lifetime Grand Prix races this year, which has been really cool because before it was very hard to watch a gravel racing. Gravel races, I say this as someone that races primarily gravel, typically not super interesting to watch from the outside perspective. I will, of course, be watching on Saturday, but if you don't have, 5-6 hours to burn, you will get just as good as news following on Instagram stories or waiting for a recap after the race. Last thing I'm going to touch on for this week is the end of the Mountain Bike World Cup season. These last 2 weeks saw the 2 American rounds of the Cross Country Mountain Bike World Cup in Lake Placid, USA, and Mont Saint Anne in Canada. Saw Christopher Blevins win the overall in the men's. He's the first American man to do that since John Tomac. Those of you who do not know who John Tomac is, you should find the photo of him racing downhill mountain bikes in the 90s on drop bars and a disc wheel, because why not? So that was really cool for all the American fans to watch Blevins win that. He took the double at Lake Placid. He won both the short track and the XCO right ahead of his teammate Adrien Boissy, the Frenchman who just moved up from the elites. He's currently splitting his time between road and mountain bike, showing a whole lot of promise on the mountain bike. We saw the retirement of the GOAT Nino Sugar a few rounds ago. I would not be surprised if we saw some version of if Adrian Boishy decides to commit to mountain bikes. I think he could be the next Nino Schurter. His performances were so good for his first two rounds in the elites. He went second in both races at Lake Placid. I think he was fourth, and I don't remember what the other one was at Mont Saint Anne. He is doing really well. If he decides to, I don't necessarily think he needs to commit to mountain bikes as over road 100% of the time to still win a few mountain bike races. We saw Alan Hatherley racing road this season and still winning mountain bike world championships as well as a World Cup. I think he can do both. Adrian Boishy can, but I think if he decides to focus fully on mountain bikes, he can be the next big thing. He's looking really good on the downs. He's looking really good on the ups. Tactically, obviously, as he's also racing road, he's very good tactically. And then on the women's side, my only really takeaway is Jenny Rizvitz is just so much better than everyone else. If you watch the race in Lake Placid, or actually any of the races in Lake Placid or Mont Saint Anne, it almost seemed like she won on accident, especially the XCO and Jenny in Lake Placid. I think it was the second lap. She ended up off the front and she looked attacked basically on accident. She looked very confused by the fact that she was off the front. I think she expected people to go with her. I just don't think there's anyone that can right now. She's just so good. And that is about all I have for this week. If you think there's anything I missed, you can message me on Instagram at Eli Does Bikes. If you think there's anything I need to talk about next week, if you are a racer and you would like to come on the show and yap about bikes with me next week, please message me. I would love to hear y'all's thoughts on bike racing on the whole. So next weekend, we're probably going to talk about what happened at Big Sugar. We're going to talk about what happened in the cross races that are happening this weekend. We're going to probably do a bigger recap on the road season as a whole because there was a whole lot to talk about. That might be its own episode if that's something people will be interested in. So that is all I have for this week in bikes. Yeah, I don't think there's any road races that are going to be super interesting to watch this week. I might be wrong, but follow Big Sugar. That should be really interesting. Follow the cyclocross races. Those are always super fun to watch. And get out there and ride your bike. Have a good week.